Introduce Sabrina Williams, the CEO and founder of Seed.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me here today in this lightning talk. As Todd said, I'm the founder and CEO of Seed. We're a startup that is democratizing access to ag tech with tools that help smallhold farmers. So there's a lot of gloom and doom today, but hopefully we'll come out of it not so gloomy and so doomy. But I'm talking about soil, and there might be some gloom. So soil. The soil on our Earth is rapidly depleting. By 2030, there will be 10 billion people to feed, and we don't really have any sustainable way of doing that in the soil that we have. We're looking at a collapse in 60 years if we don't take some steps right away. And the first speaker sort of spoke to this concept of civilizations failing due to soil and soil loss, but I've put 3 here at the bottom that might be relevant because they collapsed spectacularly due to agriculture and the loss of soil over time. There was Sumer, but in particular, the third of the list there, Troy, they lost so much soil that they were buried for thousands of years until rediscovery in the 1800s. So our soils are in a state of exhaustion. Again, this is just all the doom parts, but these are some of the reasons that we are finding our soil to be so exhausted. It's commercial agriculture primarily, but even where civilizations failed, a lot of the cause of soil loss was because of deforestation. You have construction that's just building over the soil so that it's not able to do what it's supposed to do, which is grow food in healthy ways. Fertilizers, we hear a lot of talk about fertilizers, especially nitrogen-based fertilizers that aren't all bad, but when they're used in excess, as we've seen them, we have a problem with runoff into our water systems. Tilling, which is the process of turning over the soil, creates a lot of emissions. Monocropping, which is industrial agriculture based. We have a very non-diverse industrial farming system in the United States in particular. And we use just a few crops to feed millions of people. So we need more diversity there. And then overgrazing, of course, that's when we have the animals that are taking a lot of the topsoil and a lot of the cover crops that we have that will help the soil do what it needs to do, the microbes. And again, soil is the biggest carbon sink after the oceans. It's 2,500 gigatons that it's able to sequester. And that's 3 times as much as all the carbon that's in the atmosphere and 4 times as much that's in all of us animals and plants. And importantly, there are 500 million smallholders that are growing all the food. And sadly, they bear the brunt of climate change and don't have a lot of access to the tools that can help mitigate it. Also, I think it's important to add here, there are about 2 billion humans that have their livelihoods that depend on the 500 million smallholders around the world. And they're growing about 80% of the food in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. So what to do? We need to prioritize small-scale farmers. And small-scale farmers are growing almost half of the food for everyone on the planet. And I think this circle graphic here is really important to note that they are primarily growing on less than 1 hectare of land, which is about 2.5 acres. So that's over 72% of those farmers are creating that 50% value there. They also tend to be more productive per hectare because they are not getting a lot of the resources that large farms do. And poverty reduction in a lot of nations, including ours, has been kickstarted by rising incomes among smallholders and small farmers. When we prioritize smallholders, we can achieve equity, and this is particularly true with women and girls who are far more often seeing less benefit in farming because they lose out on going to school, and also they have to take care of more of the family. So there are a few current and developing initiatives. Of course, we've just heard a bit about the IRA. The IRA alone has committed $19 billion to small farms, or just agriculture in general, I should say. But in particular, $5 billion is going into small farms. And an area that's very important for us at Seed is it's helping farmers that have been traditionally underrepresented or discriminated against in farming in the United States. But there are also policies around the world that are similar to the Inflation Reduction Act, which include policy goals for climate-smart agriculture. And those practices are the ones that will help us mitigate some of the climate change. Climate-smart practices I will go into on the future slides, but they include things like limiting inputs that are harmful to the soil, like the nitrogen-based fertilizers. There's also adaptation of new technologies, which is something that we're working on at the company. And revenue from selling environmental services. Key among these is the carbon credits and entering the carbon credit markets for these smallholders. For that, they can get paid. And then finally, coordinating all that with national and regional level stakeholders. So we're getting away from the doom a little bit. But of course, challenges remain. There's the economy of scale, which is what I was alluding to with the carbon markets. Small farms, of course, they're not sequestering as much carbon as a large farm, where you see this carbon market taking place. So what kind of systems are put in place for these farmers to aggregate? There's also the inadequate skill sets that a lot of these farmers have because they're not provided with the technologies that large farms have. And it's very expensive to gain those skill sets. They have limited access to the productivity enhancing technologies, as I just mentioned. And because of that, they have low levels of risk tolerance. The more technology that these farmers do gain, they increase their tolerance for risk. And then, of course, there's less adaptive capacity because they are, as one of the speakers mentioned, it's the low-income and developing communities and urban communities that have the most risk and loss from climate change, which makes them, again, risk intolerant, but also less adaptive because they can't get the resources to make the changes they need to. And so practical action, I don't want to leave it with just all the bad stuff. Supporting new technology, and how do we do that? It's not just the low income or developing communities that need to engage in these practices and buy this technology. It's all of us. There are 45 million of us in our own homes and gardens, urban farms, community gardens, that can take advantage of this new technology, different technologies. And the more that we buy these technologies, the lower they go in cost, and they're made available to these other communities that can really benefit from them. We all need to practice regenerative agriculture, which is back on that list about the 5 things that we're monocropping, tilling. We want to do no-till. We want to use as few fertilizers as possible. We want to be able to have cover crops, things like that. And of course, that all means we have to start growing to begin with. And any plot of soil that you have, you can grow on. Buying local, that's probably one of the easiest ways if you don't have your own plot or garden, is to make sure that you're supporting local farmers and smallholders. Composting, one of the, I think it was Rebecca, just talked about the new policy in Los Angeles County, where we're all supposed to be sending our waste to a dedicated hauler at this point. And then lastly, this isn't food-based, but planting native species. That's one of the best ways that we're going to make sure that the soil in our particular regions is doing what we need it to do. And so that is my lightning talk. And that's a little information if you want to find out more about what we're doing at Seed, but also different ways that we're working to make sure that we save the Earth's soils.
Yep. And next up is Eric Lee from Align Capital, Climate Capital.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure being here. I did want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Eric Lee, Senior Vice President at Align Climate Capital. To quickly introduce the firm, if you're not familiar, we're a multi-strategy fund manager dedicated to help solving the climate crisis. We manage 3 distinct investment strategies, 2 of which is infrastructure, 1 of which is venture, and across the board, we manage a little north of $2 billion in assets. But before jumping into the presentation, I did want to pause and kind of survey the room. Like, how many people in the audience today already work in climate? Oh, wow. And how many of you guys are entrepreneurs, founders, working at a startup? A good amount. Anybody in finance and investments? Okay. Public policy and government? Awesome. So we do have a pretty broad group of people represented here, so that's just helpful for me as I go through this presentation. So I'll start by framing the problem, and it seems like everybody's fully aware of what's happening. Climate change is real. The numbers speak for themselves. You can see that global temperature has been rising over the past decades. Ice sheets have been melting, and global sea rises have been on the rise. So I won't spend too much time here convincing you guys, because you guys are all on the same team. But again, the numbers, scientists show that the numbers are real. And it's a massive problem. Globally, it's estimated from economists and environmentalists that it will take $50 trillion in order for us to properly address climate change, in order for us to meet our Paris Climate Agreement's targets. For us at Align Climate Capital, we actually view this as a tremendous opportunity to generate strong financial returns, all the while generating meaningful environmental social impact. I'll say that we're not the only ones that believe in this. As you can see on the screen, there's a lot of other climate investors who are also sharing the same thesis that we have. And I'll also share that there's been a lot of capital being poured into this space. If you look at the numbers, since January 2021 to today, there's been over $94 billion of new capital being flowed into this space. And again, this is just for the private markets under the asset classes of venture capital, growth equity, infrastructure, and private equity. This does not account for all the massive amounts of money in the public equity space as well. And you can see the numbers kind of balloon up. In 2021, about $30 billion has been flowed into this space. Fast forwarding to 1 year later, at the end of 2022, that number had more than doubled. So right now, again, just since January 2021, $94 billion of new capital has been poured in. This is a very hot market, and there's a lot of noise and excitement around the space. However, I do want to kind of frame this kind of idea into the way that we see it. Through the lens of Align Climate Capital, we bifurcate the market into 2 main sectors. One is proven technology, as you can see, and then the other is breakthrough technology. For us at Align, I know that breakthrough technology is usually the shiniest, the most innovative, the newest thing that really catches people's attention, but we do focus on proven technology for 3 main reasons. One of it is to scale the impact quicker, the immediacy of impact, and the sustainability of impact. So what is proven technology? In short, proven technology is commercial technology that's been in operation for at least 2 years. You can see in this graph on the right, or on your guys' right-hand side, the things with the green dots are considered proven technology. Examples of this include solar, wind, EV charging stations, lithium-ion battery storage systems, things that you see in the market today as you kind of drive around Los Angeles, technologies that you see in the public. On the flip side of the equation, it's kind of breakthrough technology. What's included in breakthrough technology? It's technologies such as material science, nuclear fusion, anything that's in the pilot stages or before, maybe early stage R&D, would be considered breakthrough. Both of them are extremely important for us to focus and fight the climate crisis. But again, this is just sharing our reasons why we like to focus on the proven. So, and the answer is essentially this. We believe that proven and commercial technology will play a greater role in avoiding the worst effects of climate change. The United Nations had set their 2050 net zero target goals, and in that process, they set up interim targets in order for us to successfully achieve that. When you're looking at the 2030 interim target goals, they suggest that almost all of it, largely all of it, will be achieved through existing climate technologies. So this does not include your fanciest, shiniest, innovative technologies such as direct air capture or anything. It's simply technologies that's already in the market. It's our responsibility to scale that, to deploy that, and to put it into people, put it into places where people have access to, and increase the usability of it. If you extend that horizon out to 2050, it shows you that about 2/3 or 65% of the global climate crisis will be addressed by existing technology, and only 1/3 of it will be contributed through breakthrough technology. Again, it's just an illustrative way to say both are needed, but one area does have a heavier or more powerful role from our perspective. And this slide is just to kind of illustrate it a little bit further. It's the 2050 marginal abatement cost curve. It's a fancy kind of deep analysis of showing per dollar invested, where will you get the greatest impact? And as you can see, the areas that we invest up here, again, these are technologies as previously mentioned, like solar, wind, EV charging stations, etc. On a per dollar basis, the ROI of impact will be the greatest. So strategically, not only from the financial perspective, but the impact and climate perspective, we do focus our attention there. And the impacts do not only include the environmental and climate impacts, but there's tremendous economic and social impacts that follow. So for example, if you look into the areas of proven commercial tech, just taking solar and wind as an example, these numbers from the 2015 to 2050 timeline will 3 to 4x over that time period. Breakthrough technology, although while it is important, will not be able to support that many jobs because those jobs are highly skilled. It takes specialized engineers and scientists that are working on smaller pilot scale projects. So they will not be able to support the local economy in the same scale that proven technology would be. So just to kind of bring it all home and kind of showcase an example, and by no means is this way to kind of speak badly of any of the companies here. I really love Zap Energy. I'm a huge fan of what they're doing. But to quickly introduce, Summit Ridge Energy is actually one of our portfolio companies. They are a solar developer in Virginia. And then Zap Energy is a portfolio company of other climate investors in the space, and they essentially build out nuclear fusion reactors. Both firms were started about the same time, in 2017. Both firms employ roughly a little less than 100 employees, and both firms raised similar amounts of capital to date, a little shy of 200 million for both. However, the biggest difference that you see is in the climate impact. You see that Summit Ridge Energy has completed more than 70 solar projects to date, which is equivalent to about 60,000 metric tons of CO2 avoided through their business operations. On the flip side, you go over to Zap Energy, and they do not have currently a commercially viable product. A lot of their technologies are still in pilot and beta testing. So they have zero realized climate impact. Again, I'm a huge fan of them. They have massive potential. The potential of actually one of these reactors has the capability to produce about 50 megawatts of electricity. So once commercialized, once fully scaled, the impact potential is quite massive, but this is just, again, for illustrative purposes, why we like to focus on it. I know that in today's environment, when you're talking about venture capital, when you're talking about climate investing, people like to spend a lot of their attentions on the newest, shiniest, and fanciest thing. But I just wanted to share perspective and give people a different insight of why proven and commercial technology is also a very important part of the whole climate crisis. So thank you guys all. I'll be here for the rest of the day, so looking forward to connecting.
Amazing. Next up, we have Dr. Joshua Fisher.
I'm Josh Fisher. I'm a climate scientist. Was at NASA for about 12 years, launched a mission to the International Space Station called EcoStress, focusing on droughts, wildfires, agriculture, ecosystems. Where do I need to stand? Okay, there we go. All right, here we go. Now you can't hear me. All right, there we go. I'm a professor now and the science lead for a company called Hydrosat, where some of us from the Jet Propulsion Lab kind of broke some technology off, technology that we had launched to Mars, and are accelerating it through the commercial sector to really try to transform how we adapt to a changing climate. So Todd wanted me to set the stage a little bit. So of course, temperatures changed since the history of Earth, but we're now venturing into uncharted territory, temperatures we haven't seen for hundreds of thousands of years, which means we kind of don't know what to do. And of course, the Earth's population continues to rise, necessitating a 60% increase in food production and water supply. As we know very well in California, we're having more extreme droughts, more extreme wet seasons, and so on. And so it presents a kind of a critical challenge to be able to deal with climate change to support human civilization as well as our ecosystems. The droughts are unprecedented. Every time we get a drought, it's the worst drought since the last drought, which was the worst drought ever, and so on. And it's tough to live. It's tough to grow. It's like farming in hell. What's worse is that our drought prediction capabilities are not really well equipped to accurately predict these droughts and what to do. We're seeing massive political instability, migrations, and so on associated with climate change and droughts and lack of water. So we have situations where we got water, and then we have situations where we don't have water, and we had about a year of surface water left in California a few years ago. Now we're doing well, but these wets and dries are just going to get more extreme into the future. I thought this was an interesting article. We even have water thieves. Right? This isn't a movie anymore. What else with temperature, extreme temperatures? Our infrastructure is strong, but the Earth is stronger, and our roads, are melting and so on. Let's see. I guess the previous speaker, one of the previous speakers, talked about soil. Well, there's your soil. It's not exactly where you want it to be when things are getting dry and windy, and you've got microbes hitching rides on them and getting into your lungs like little windsurfers. And of course, our wildfires are getting bigger, hotter, more intense, more frequent. Our firefighters are going in to fight fires while losing their own homes to fires and their own lives. So, what do we need? We need to monitor this. We need to monitor it closely, accurately, high resolution, frequently. And so we're measuring temperature, the temperature of the planet, the pulse of the planet. It's through thermal infrared radiation, and it allows us to see things that you can't see with the naked eye. Like an X-ray, you can see through your skin to see the broken bone. And so if we've got this landscape and we have a drought that hits this, some of these trees are going to die first, and we want to know that. We want to know when and where and why. And our managed ecosystems, our agriculture, will have some parts of the fields that start to dry out first, and we want to be able to track that precisely so we can manage and mitigate those losses. So in terms of technology, unfortunately, what you end up having is this trade-off between high spatial resolution and high temporal resolution. You either have satellites that look very closely and get you good spatial resolution, but it takes forever for them to repeat. or they're zoomed out and you can see the whole world frequently, but it's too coarse to see what's going on the ground. And so you kind of need a lot of these high resolution. This was the mission that I launched, EcoStress. So in NASA and ESA and the French and the Indians continue to try to march this forward into the sweet spot, but we're not quite getting there yet. Hydrosat, which is this company that we're spinning off, is getting that bullseye, and it's getting that early warning so we can do something about climate change. So we're launching this constellation of satellites. Our first launch is next year, and basically it kind of looks like this by artist rendering. So right now we have kind of the Landsat series, which will give you a high resolution image once every 16 days, but we have no idea what's going on in between all those days. We use the coarse resolution satellites to fill it in, which is inadequate. And so Hydrosat is coming along and being able to provide that information. So it's game changing. We've been wanting this for decades, from the scientific, from the agricultural, from the ecosystems communities. I've been working closely with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Was on a phone call this morning with them, showing them the early. They're actually using our early adopter data product, and we're blown away about how revolutionary this can be to managing agriculture. So we use these data. We're at the AILA. We use AI and ML to run the data through to create analytics and predict how much water is going to be needed and how much food is going to be produced for agriculture and other ecosystems applications. And this was a fun cover. I was on the cover of a magazine recently from a paper that we published where we can now use a lot of these data to, the team that I led, we can now predict every single food crash in the history of the record before it occurs. 3 months before it occurs, sometimes up to 6 months before it occurs. So it's not only just like cool satellites in the sky that seem to have relevance, but we're actually now working with the UN World Food Program and essentially saving lives. So here's some cool slogans from Hydrosat. And there we go, if you want to reach me. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. My name is Judy Lai-Norling. I am Chief Operating Officer of Carbon Mapper. Thanks for putting me behind Josh. He does such beautiful presentations, but he's also such a great scientist. We worked together at NASA JPL before this, so I can tease him about this. But I love it because he did such a great job of queuing up some of the challenges related to climate change, talking about how they're going to measure temperature. And so what I want to talk about with Carbon Mapper is how we can actually hopefully reduce some of that temperature and get a hold of the climate change action. And so I want to talk about Carbon Mapper's mission to locate, quantify, and track methane and carbon dioxide from air and space. So I'm going to focus on the topic of methane superemitters. So I know when it comes to climate change, most people are very familiar with greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide, but may not be as familiar with the topic of methane. But methane has been getting a lot of attention in recent years because in the short term, methane has 80 times more global warming potential than carbon dioxide in the 20-year time period. So because of that, by reducing methane emissions, this gives us the fastest path to addressing some of our 2030 targets as laid out in the 2015 Paris Agreement and in the recent Global Methane Pledge announced at last year's UN COP conference. The other thing about methane superemitters is that a very small number of methane superemitters can actually account for up to 20 to 60% of a region's emissions. So by targeting a very small number of facilities and emissions events, we can really take a huge bite out of our overall emissions. Moreover, we see methane superemitters across all sorts of emitting sectors. So everybody thinks about oil and gas and energy, but it turns out that actually agriculture is a huge source of methane emissions, as well as waste. So all of our landfills and our wastewater in California, it's actually about a third oil and gas, a third agriculture, and 1/3 landfills and wastewater. So lots of opportunity for us to address the methane problem. Furthermore, in addition to the climate change problem, by measuring methane, we can actually help address some issues of air quality and public health. And this has a lot of environmental justice implications for us because historically, a lot of the methane and CO2 emitting facilities are located in disadvantaged neighborhoods. You can see this example here of New Orleans. We measure lots of methane emissions from landfills, from petrochemical plants, from lots of facilities that are located right next to disadvantaged neighborhoods. So, all right, so what is Carbon Mapper's role in this? So I'm coming from a little bit a different perspective. Carbon Mapper is actually a nonprofit organization. It started in 2021 by our CEO, Riley Duran, who also came from NASA JPL. I came from NASA. We have, so we brought over quite a few people using NASA technology to commercialize and expand on this. And our mission is to provide direct measurements and transparent measurements of carbon dioxide emission and carbon dioxide and methane emissions in order to enable science-based decision making. So we do this through 4 main pathways. One is to provide the data. So we want to make sure that we're collecting data that is precise, timely, and accessible. And Carbon Mapper, the nonprofit, is making that all available for free on our open data portal. Second, we have an underlying science mission. So we want to make sure that we're advancing research and development in remote sensing technologies to improve measurement and detection of methane and carbon dioxide. We also want to make sure that our data is being used by policymakers and regulatory agencies to enable informed regulations. So we're working directly with the agencies so that they can understand how to use our data and our type of data to inform greenhouse gas inventories as well as designing enforcement programs. And lastly, we have lots of active collaboration and stakeholder engagement with other partners and other actors in the realm because we are primarily a data provider and we are looking to other partners to use that data to help actually design and recommend methane emission strategies. So in addition to Carbon Mapper and the nonprofit, we also have the Carbon Mapper Coalition, which refers to a private-public partnership, which is led by Carbon Mapper, the nonprofit, along with our major partners, Planet Labs in San Francisco and NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And so we have come together to actually build and launch satellites that are capable of detecting methane and carbon dioxide. We are currently in what we call phase 1 of the program, which is actually fully funded by philanthropy. And so we have been funded to build and launch the first 2 satellites, which will launch later this year and early next year and operate for about 12 months. And then eventually we hope to expand to a full constellation of satellites, which like Josh explained earlier, this is what will get us to the daily to weekly monitoring of facilities. Ultimately, we want to be able to locate 90% of the globes of the world's super emitters around the world. And like I said before, all of the methane and CO2 data will be made publicly available on the Carbon Mapper website after 90 days. Before 90 days, Planet Labs is actually offering a commercial methane quick look product as well as a suite of hyperspectral products, and that's what sustains the overall partnership. In the meantime, Carbon Mapper is also operating lots of airborne surveys to help prepare all of our stakeholders for using the data as well as validating the satellite data after they launch. So there are several other companies out there who are either operating methane satellites or in the process of launching methane satellites. And so what sets Carbon Mapper apart, like I said, we are a nonprofit. We have that public mission to distribute that data and make it available for everybody. But one of the key differences between us and everybody else is that we are able to make global observations, but at the scale of individual facilities. So in this map here, you can see with our satellite coverage, we are going to be able to map all of these areas for methane. The purple areas are what we call our priority target deck, and with the first 2 satellites, we're going to be monitoring those areas at a monthly to quarterly scale, but we're also going to do the first ever global survey of methane super emitters. So that's all of the yellow in that region. And then as we expand our constellation, we'll be able to see all of these locations up to daily to weekly. But beyond the global scale of this, what our technology brings us is the ability to see the methane emissions at the scale of individual facilities. And this is what really drives the climate change action, because we're not just measuring methane emissions across a country scale or state scale or regional scale, but now we can get to actual locations and facilities and work with regulatory agencies and work with the operators to actually identify what is causing these emissions. And in half of the cases that we've experienced so far, the operators have let us know that these things are actually mitigatable or addressable. So you can see we've collected data. These are from our airborne surveys, but the satellite data will look very similar. We've collected data from across a variety of sectors here. We have just expanded our airborne operations into Latin America earlier this year, and so working with the Global South, and like I said, with the satellite data, we'll start to expand globally as well. Another exciting thing about our technology in the lower right-hand corner is one of the things that we can do is we can actually track offshore emissions. So we can use our satellites and our aircraft and use the reflection of the sun to see methane emissions over dark water. And eventually we'll actually be able to track methane emissions from tanker ships, LNG tankers, as they're crossing the ocean. So really exciting use of the technology. I want to close with an exciting case study. So our CEO, Riley Duran, he's been working on this for the last 10 years at NASA JPL before he started the Carbon Mapper, the nonprofit. And he and other members of our research team have been working with the state of California for several years. We monitored over 400,000 facilities in the state of California for methane emissions. And it turns out that less than 1% of those facilities were responsible for 50% of the state's emissions. And by working with just 8 of those companies, we were able to reduce methane emissions by 75,000 tons of methane per year. So you can really see by being able to monitor all of these methane emissions at the facility scale, working with the regulatory agencies, working with the operators, methane really, addressing the question of methane super emitters really is our best low-hanging fruit for immediate climate change action. So thanks for listening to me today. I invite you all to learn more at carbonmapper.org.
All right, well, thank you very much. My name is Chris Chavez. I am the Deputy Policy Director at Coalition for Clean Air. We are a nonprofit advocacy organization based in downtown LA, and most of our work is in California. And our mission is to protect public health, improve air quality, and prevent climate change, though we know that climate change is actively happening. I think for today's discussion, what I'm going to look at and discuss is something a little bit more local. We always hear of California being a climate leader, California leading the way globally amongst the United States. But there are a number of factors when it comes to air quality that we need to remember. And I think that there have been a number of discussions I've been in which people have had sometimes a tendency to prioritize to minimize the importance of air quality. So we're going to talk a little bit about the local impacts that people face in the communities in LA and in the LA area. So yes, we all know the global climate crisis is an existential threat, but the air quality that people face in a number of communities in California, noise. All right. The air quality that people breathe in California is also a threat in itself. It was just announced for another consecutive year that Southern California is home to the dirtiest air in the nation when it comes to smog. We're right up there with particulate matter. And another thing that we need to remember is that our air quality fails to meet national and state standards. So in other words, our air is so dirty, the air that we're all breathing is so dirty, it's actually illegal. Just think about that. However, that burden is not equally shared. Low-income communities, disadvantaged communities have the brunt of the impact. And unfortunately, tragically, a lot of those communities are, again, low-income, primarily communities of color, and they're all clustered around largely each other. Southern California is home to more disadvantaged community census tracts than anywhere else in California. Part of this is due to poor planning, but part of this is also a legacy of historical discrimination. If you look at a map of today's disadvantaged communities, there's a very strong overlap with communities that were formerly redlined back in the 1930s and 40s. These communities face multiple burdens, such as barriers to healthcare, reliable and clean transportation, water pollution. This picture that I took was actually from Tuesday in the city of Maywood. And that park that we were at is also a former Superfund site. Now, granted, the topsoil has been remediated, but the groundwater is completely polluted. So we're going to look a little bit at what's known as the Wilmington-Carson-West Long Beach Assembly Bill 617 community. This is a 2017 law that required the Air Resources Board, California Air Resources Board, and the air districts to identify highly polluted communities. We don't have to go through all of this. This is actually the community I live in. I'm close to dot number 33 there. But this is also the community that's directly adjacent to the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles, which takes in about 40% of all goods coming into the United States. The bulk of California's oil refining capacity is in our backyards. We have 5 major freeways, including the 405, 710, 91, 110 freeway, and so on. Multiple rail yards, thousands of oil wells, mostly abandoned, but many are active or idle, industrial sources, a commercial airport, and so on. So that just gives you an idea of some of the challenges, some of the burdens that people in this area face. And I think the next slide, if I remember right. So this is in Wilmington. That's a residential area directly adjacent to an oil refinery. What you don't see is directly behind me when I took that picture was the 110 freeway. So you literally have a neighborhood sandwiched between an oil refinery and a freeway. So pollution and other inequities have consequences. So looking at the city where I live in, the lifespan in Western Long Beach is up to 8.5 years shorter than on the east side of the city. Residents of Western and Northern Long Beach have a higher risk of cancer and asthma. As somebody who grew up in Western Long Beach, I had asthma as a kid. My cousin who grew up in the same neighborhood had asthma as a kid. And it's just one of these things. It's assumed that happens. But when you start looking at the air pollution, it begins to make sense. You also have other things like cardiovascular diseases, low birth weight, and other risks that are present in the entire community. So again, this burden is not shared equally. If we look at the life expectancy in our communities, the Black and African American community takes the hardest hit. White, non-Hispanic, Hispanic, Asian are also impacted to different degrees. However, they have a little bit more common lifespan. But this really shows that the folks who live in those communities do have significant impacts. This other slide or this other graphic looks at the different zip codes. And if you look at where the highest incomes are is where you have the longest health expectancy. The lowest income is the shortest life expectancy. So how do we fix this problem? There's no single solution. There's nothing I can put together in a single PowerPoint. But I think there are some common things that we need to keep in mind as we're discussing climate and environmental policy. First, California's climate and environmental policies and investments need to address air pollution both at the macro level and the community level. And really looking at how to create bottom-up solutions, working with community organizations, working with local partners, is preferable to top-down approaches. But we need to keep in mind that not all communities have the same capacity and they need assistance, they need help in building that capacity up. Both policy and implementation need to be consistent with our climate and air quality commitments and obligations. So avoiding a situation where we're saying one thing but doing something else. So for example, at the very heart of the Wilmington, Carson, and West Long Beach community, there's a proposal to build a new rail yard. So that is being proposed by the port, by BNSF in the Port of Los Angeles. Same thing with San Bernardino, in the San Bernardino area in Colton. There's another proposal to put a new rail yard in that facility, which is right next to an AB 617, a low-income disadvantaged community. So we need to have that sort of consistency from our state leaders, from our local leaders, in order to actually begin addressing these issues. And then lastly, I think of something as environmental advocates that we can do is to really elevate the concerns and issues that these communities face alongside with the bigger picture, larger scale climate challenges that we all face as well. Because unfortunately, in a lot of cases, the experiences that happen in the community, the lived experiences, tend to get lost in discussion, lost in the focus when we're talking about air pollution and the climate crisis. And that is my slides, and thank you very much for your time.
So I'm the last person speaking between you and a break, so I am trying to keep it light a little bit along the way. And I also, I'm not a policy person. My company, Braid Theory, I'm CEO, has been around for about 8 years. We're a venture advisory firm that is focused on specifically working with engineering and science-led entrepreneurs to get them to scale and to get these solutions into the market. So we're very much a hands-on solution-oriented. And so the talk that I'm going to talk about today about the ocean, climate problems, also climate solutions, because you can't think of one without the other. The other thing I really hope to have you take away with is ocean equals climate, climate equals ocean. Don't start thinking them as an other. So if you say, are you in climate? If you work with ports, if you work with industrial applications, if you work with ocean data, yeah, you're working with climate. So would like to kind of keep that in mind. Okay. Hello? Okay, there we go. Sorry for the eye chart, but the other part is I hear so often when people think about talking about the ports, they talk about other. They talk about ocean, oh, it's that ocean plastic. The ocean is a lot more integral, and I hope you all walk away from this short talk of realizing how connected you are to the ocean, even if you never step foot in the water. So every breath you take, every second breath you take is thanks to the ocean and the phytoplankton in the ocean. But an interesting fun fact, since 1950, we've lost about 40% of our phytoplankton. And it has been reducing about 1% a year. Interesting fun fact, because where are we going to get our oxygen? The ocean's our global thermostat. So, it's the heat sink. The top 10 feet of the ocean is storing as much heat as the atmosphere. So if you look at 90% of the Earth's warming, it's really around the ocean. And when you look at the downstream effects related to that, about biodiversity loss, about our food security, about climate change, about changing of ocean currents, it's pretty devastating. Ocean feeds us. 16% of all animal protein consumed globally is from the ocean, and it is increasing at alarming rates. But when you think about that nearly 90% of the world's ocean feedstock is depleted, nearly depleted, overexploited, etc. We don't know what we don't know. Biodiversity in the ocean, over 90% of the bacteria in the entire planet is in the ocean, and it's deep ocean, and we know so little about what is even there. So that could be our cancer cures. That could be our plastic-eating bacteria. It could be the next source of new fuels. It's everything, but we don't even know it's all there. And then the other part about it, so when you're talking about soils, about 2 billion people, ocean, same thing. 3 billion people, that's 1/3 of the people on the planet rely on the sea for their livelihoods. And when we look at some of the downstream effects, we're looking at moving entire nations due to sea level rise. Okay. So, interesting topic I want to talk about is just, again, it's just how much more, back to some of the talks what you were talking about acceleration and our use as humans on the ocean. So there's a great, I have a list of resources that I'll leave with you, but the blue acceleration, the trajectory of human expansion into the ocean, really starts getting at how we use the ocean, not only for food, pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, materials, of course, hydrocarbons, minerals, future water source for us, but also the space itself, all of our shipping, etc. And similar, so again, but it's not just all bad news, right? So we look at these huge ramp-ups, like in shipping, and so it's really, really easy to point fingers at our ports and how awful they are, but I live right above the port community. I live and work in San Pedro, and during the pandemic, when everything was shut down, I was watching 80 to 100 ships idling in the harbor directly below my house, directly below my office, and that was because we were all buying stuff. Our consumerism is rising at such a point, so it's easy to blame the ports, but we have to kind of look at how we're sourcing and what we're doing. And there's so many really interesting activities related to the decarbonization of shipping, related to green shipping corridors, biofuels, new methods of propulsion, so much. It's what I want to start saying is it's a really great time to be in ocean tech, because there's never been more interest, more understanding, more resources being put towards it, and this is an opportunity within the ocean. So much on land, we've looked at business and growth and humanity as extraction. We can keep going down this path with the ocean, or we can really start thinking it as the best place for regenerative approaches, for sustainable practices. We don't have to always be thinking about extractive fishing. We can think about sustainable aquaculture. We don't have to think about, when you look at this, some of the downside about the loss of fish stocks, you can also see this huge growth in marine protected areas. We can actually regenerate. The studies are showing that in really, really short periods of time, with adequate marine protected areas, we are bringing back nearly extinct and incredibly threatened species, and it comes back in a very short way. So there's a lot that we can be doing to assist that. So what do we do about it? Well, one thing I will say is we really need to put a lot more financial resources. If you think about the impact on the ocean, the amount of money that is going to ocean-focused solutions is a literal drop in the ocean, and is defined by, for example, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 goals, right? Number 14 is life below water. That receives the least amount of long-term funding of any of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And it's just thinking that just to fit these goals, it's expected that you needed $175 billion per year between now and 2030, and less than $10 billion was actually invested for 5 years. So you can just start seeing there's such a huge disconnect between need and funding. So the other thing I want to say is I'm going to put something through Braid theory lens, because back to practicality, we work with entrepreneurs that are in all aspects of blue economy, everything from decarbonization of shipping to marine energy to synthetic biology for ocean and climate solutions, and data analysis around efficiencies of goods movement, etc. I will say that when we look at ocean, we look at and solutions that can fit blue economy. We look across so many of the sectors you guys are already in. We look at agriculture and biotech and water and utility and clean tech. We look at transportation, deep sea and deep space. There's such an interesting correlation between how you look at, especially around data. And then I would also challenge you to say that come see me afterwards, no matter what industry sector you're in, no matter what discipline that you're in, I can find a direct correlation why you should care about the ocean. So I am going to leave you as a leave behind a ton of resources. The Ocean Decade is a great site to just get a lot of information about what you can do as an individual, as a company, as a policy, as a country, all sorts of different levels of how you can participate. If you want to just completely feel like you need to curl up in a ball and die, read the IPCC 6th Assessment Report. And, well, right? Okay. But if you also want to be inspired, there's two things. For all the entrepreneurs in the room, there's a wonderful organization that I'm involved with called Ocean Exchange, and we give away free money, 3 $100,000 awards, plus a ton of ongoing support to support entrepreneurs that are having solutions related to ocean and a lot related to ports, shipping, decarbonization of shipping. And then, shameless plug, my own company, we have a tech showcase event on May 4th, which is called Ignite 22, and it's just a giant conversation. The tech showcase, 60 to 80 early stage companies, show and tell, demos on land, in water, about a third from policy, third from industry, a third from entrepreneurs and investors. We think that the right way that you actually start solving this is shake up the jar and bring all these different groups together. So I'd love to have you join us on May 4th. And so this picture, this is a blue whale, and this is, my house is just right over there. Right at the port of Los Angeles, the blue whale is the largest animal by mass, not quite by length, known ever. And here it is, just right out of our port. There's some amazing things where our urban LA ecosystem and nature still weirdly coexist. And I'd like to say that the ocean, this is one of my favorite quotes, the ocean is not too big to fail, nor is it too big to fix, but it's too big to ignore. So thank you very much.